Hello, everyone. My name is Davina Davidson, and I am a Lululemon ambassador and a Houston-based yoga teacher, trainer, and teacher. And I am here with Dara, like Sarah, and I'm just always going to say that because that's how I learned to say her name correctly. And we are in a series around listening to Black stories of Black yoga teachers, Black yoga students from all around the world, and really just giving them a space to share their experiences and to amplify the voice of the Black yogi, because we know as a community that our voices are not always heard, nor are our faces always seen. So, Dara, tell us, how do we say your whole name and how would you like to be identified?
Sure. So my name is Dara Thurmond. I identify as she and her. And yeah. I love that the Dara like Sarah has stuck because that is definitely like in my bio and so many people do that. So I'm glad that that resonates.
It's a real thing. Dara like Sarah. I love it. Where are you from and do you still live where you're originally from?
So I am a transplant between New York and New Jersey. So I was born in New York and I was in New York until I was 7. Then I moved to New Jersey, was raised in New Brunswick. And then for the last 10 years, I've been back in New York between the Bronx and Brooklyn. So I'm a little NY, NJ baby.
Okay. And you are outside of teaching yoga. What else do you do?
I am a pediatric nurse full time. That is nearest and dear to my heart. I've been a nurse now for 8 years, which is crazy to me because it feels like I just became a nurse yesterday. But yes, I've been nursing for 8 years. Last 4 years, January would be 5 years that I've been in pediatrics. But prior to that, I was doing outpatient methadone clinic for mental health, people with addiction. So methadone is something given to people who are trying to come off of heroin. So I did that for about 4 years, and then I was in inpatient psych at a city hospital for 8 months, and that's like you need the key to get on and off the unit. Make sure you lock the door behind you, like that type of inpatient psych for 8 months before now being where I'm happiest with the babies and pediatrics in a private practice.
I love that. That just means like you needed the yoga. Yes?
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because I found yoga in the my third semester of nursing school. So I was like, if I'm going to be a nurse and I'm going to be advocating for patients and educating them on like wellness and how to live healthier lives to prevent certain situations and diseases and everything, I'm like, I need to make sure I'm doing the same thing. I can't be out here just telling you what to do and not doing it for myself. It felt very hypocritical in a sense. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start going to the gym and I'm going to start eating right. And that ended up leading into me finding yoga.
I love that. Walk your talk. Walk.
Absolutely.
uh, do you remember what your first yoga class was like?
So my first yoga class was probably maybe a year after I actually started doing yoga.
Mm.
I originally started doing yoga at home. Like I said, during like the whole wellness, getting fit type thing, I had P90X DVDs, and P90X had a yoga DVD. So I would just like rewatch the P90X yoga, and then I'm like, I'm gonna manifest this and make this my own little thing without having to watch it after a while. So for a long time, I was practicing at home, and my first class was probably at Yoga to the People, I think. And this was like a little $5 community class that I found in the city. Um, it was interesting because I'm pretty sure I was like the only Black person in the room. And it's weird because when you enter these spaces, you feel the shift in energy, but you can't really like place it or like verbalize what it is that you're feeling, but you feel the shift and you feel the energy. And I took the class, it was okay. And I was like, okay, I'm cool with just keeping my practice at home. Like I could stay home and do this.
You're like, yo, I don't need the community.
No, absolutely. Right.
Oh, makes sense.
Yep.
I love that. Do you remember, because I have been to, I want to say there's several, or there were several Yoga to the People studios around town. Do you remember your teacher? What did your teacher look like?
Super thin. I believe she was Asian,
Mm.
but super thin, super bendy. Because Yoga to the People is like very, like their practice is like almost contortion level with the bends, the back bends that they do. So they do a lot of like deep back bends, but the flexibility was like insane.
I think the first class I took at Yoga to the People was with Talia Sutra.
Yes, I know exactly
Yes.
who this is.
And back bendy is what I'm talking about. Like, wow, I've never, I personally, she gave me some really great cues to get deeper into the posture, but I had never experienced anything like that in a regular yoga class, like being asked to go that deep.
Right, because they'll teach you and cue you back bends like a back bend workshop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. Well, it's different, I'll say, in terms of a regular yoga class. To be actually taught is a little different. And then you said, no, I don't. I can do this at home. Did you continue to do it at home, or did you work your way back into a studio setting?
So I continued to do it at home, and I actually what I would do doing it at home allowed me to get on Instagram and like find different yogis who were doing yoga. So I ended up following a lot of people through Instagram. And if like certain yogis were in New York, I would pop in and take workshops. So that was kind of how like my first few years of yoga looked. Practice majority at home. And then if somebody was in town doing a workshop, I'd go to the workshop. And then whatever I found that I liked from the workshop, I would pull it and then take it back to my home practice and build up on that. I took a workshop at Carson in like 2017, 2016. Irene, I took one of her back bend workshops. So it was certain teachers who I was like, oh, they're here, I'm going to take their workshop. And that's how I navigated it. I probably wasn't taking classes regularly in a studio until I did my 200 hours.
Wow. Okay. Well, I recall a certain someone made their way to New York and then was on like in your Instagram in your DMs and it was like, you want to take a yoga class together? Do you remember that person?
I do remember that person, and that person was like, that's not the yoga I'm used to doing.
Yes.
What is this back of the mat stuff? I don't know. What are we doing? Dancing back and forth. Like I don't understand.
Yes, I totally sneaked into your DMs. I was visiting in New York. I actually did a couple of Instagram jams in New York where I mean, I flew from Houston and was like, I'm going to meet the people. I want to meet the people. And you were one of the people that I was like, I just want to meet her. And so I reached out. And the class that we took was, I don't think that Dana did not teach the class, but it was at Laughing Lotus, yes?
It was.
And that whole OMG dancing to the back of the mat, I said, I don't know what y'all doing in here. In New York, y'all do dancing yoga.
No, really, it's very, I feel like all the teachers in New York have a dancing background, and that's why yoga is like that in New York or up here, especially at Laughing Lotus. Like they will have you dancing and like body waving all over your mat. And if you're not used to it, you'll definitely be looking around like, well, wait, what are we doing? What's happening right now?
Yeah. And I don't recall there being very many Black people or people of color in that class. Is that the studio that you ended up doing your teacher training at?
Yes, it was. So when I did my teacher training, it was me and two other Black women. And then, of course, while I was doing my teacher training, there would be Black people who were in the front of the house. So your front desk staff were Black and brown, but teachers that were on the schedule to teach, no.
Okay. How many people were in your teacher training?
It was a big group, maybe 30 of us, 35.
And you had 3 Black people.
Yep, me. I'm part of the 3. So me and 2 other.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And how was that experience in terms of shares and different things like that? How did that play out for you? Because I know in yoga teacher training there's a lot of different sharing, and just because it's a space for us to, or generally in a yoga teacher setting, for people to do some personal growth work. What did that feel like being one of, a few Black people in teacher training?
It was interesting. It definitely felt, I felt like I could share and open up, but not completely, because there's just certain things that as Black people we go through, we experience, we deal with, that we just don't feel comfortable sharing or speaking about in mixed company, So I'm grateful for one of the girls that I did do my yoga teacher training with, because when we would have our breaks, we would have our little powwows during break just to talk about things that were coming up for us that we didn't feel comfortable sharing. And to this day, like, her and I are still super close. I call her my soul sister, because we just immediately clicked and bonded, and it was something very authentic about, like, us just being very comfortable in our Blackness, and owning that and being okay with that, but also knowing, like, we're not going to push the power to the people in your face, because it was something that we were going to figure out how to manifest outside of that.
Yeah. I'm interested because we have this space and we have this opportunity to share the things. Can you recall an example of what is something that maybe you felt like you couldn't share in mixed company, or something that you feel safe sharing in this space, but give the people more color or around what you're really trying to say?
But nothing comes out particular about my 200-hour teacher training, but I do remember, so I've done 3 different trainings. I've done a 25-hour restorative training, a 200-hour regular teacher training, and then a 50-hour shopper training. And I've done all 3 of them at Laughing Lotus.
Okay.
During the 50-hour training, the shopper training that I did, I remember one of, like, the senior teachers talking about, oh, we have this new program that's supposed to be about, like, minority groups, and we're trying to bring something different to the yoga space, right? So I remember me and another Black girl who were doing the same training together, we tried to see if we could hold space for Black yogis, and we wanted it to be inclusively for Black yogis. And the senior teacher couldn't wrap their head around, like, why just Black people? Why can't it be, like, for everyone? And to try and articulate that and verbalize that to someone who isn't Black is very hard. It's like, because it's not, you don't want to, like, dismiss their emotional intelligence or what it is that they may be able to comprehend or what they can't comprehend. But at the same time, it's like, I don't want to have to explain it to you. Like, just let us hold the space. If you are putting this program together to do special projects, to make it be for different groups of people who need a little bit more love and attention, just let us hold that space without explanation or without rhyme or reason. We're not going to do anything that's destructive or disrespectful to the space that you're allowing us to hold. But I shouldn't have to, like, necessarily explain and break that all down all the time.
Okay. Were you on the teaching staff there, or were you just a community member?
I was just a community member. Towards the end of my 200 hours, I saw the favoritism. I saw how certain in-studio politics were playing out. And I was just like, because I do nursing full-time, teaching is not my main source of income. And for me, that's definitely coming from a privileged place, because I know a lot of us don't. And a lot of people who do their 200 hours, like, I'm a yoga teacher and I'm going to be teaching, and this is how I'm making my money. So for me, having the luxury of knowing that my main source of income was nursing, I wasn't going to put myself in a studio where it'd be 1 or 2 times a week where I would have to deal with the BS of the politics of studio, or the little microaggressions or the little looks that you get here and there. Like, I just wasn't up for it. And I knew by the time I finished my 200 hours that I wasn't going to be teaching in the space.
Do you feel like, I'm just like, I want to know all the things. I want to get up in the business of it. Like, I want to understand. Do you feel like there was favoritism towards your white peers in terms of getting on the schedule? Or because as 200-hour teachers, you're not guaranteed to be able to teach on the schedule. It's just a certificate. I guess what I'm curious of are what kinds of experiences were you actually having that made you feel this way to even be saying these things now?
Yeah, so and then also too, Laughing Lotus is big on like the LGBT community too. So it was someone who was in our class, gay male, Latino, but white passing. He did one community class, or he only had to do one community class, and then he was automatically on the sub list for classes after one community class. And I'm like, interesting. Why so quick? Whereas everybody else was told they would have to do multiple community classes. So it was little things like that. And then seeing that one of my friends who was in the training too, be constantly told to do more community classes. And not get the chance to be on the sub list. Black woman who did the same training, same 200 hours, but she's being forced to kind of be on the back burner a little bit more than said male. So I little things like that, I was just like, nah, this doesn't feel right. And then if I'm feeling that as someone who is like supposed to be part of the teaching staff, as a teacher, knowing the type of people I wanted to come into the space, I did my yoga teacher training to teach people who look like me. So if I'm promoting classes in a certain space and I'm bringing Black people into this space and they have to deal with certain things, then I feel guilty for bringing them into the space to feel whatever type of microaggressions they would feel for entering the space and being there as well.
Understood. I think it's interesting that you said you did your teacher training to teach yoga to people who look like you. And I'm curious if that was their perspective. Like, we're teaching yoga and we're sharing yoga for people who look like us. And I only say that because at the beginning of June, after some things in the world shifted, I did have some conversations with Houston yoga studio owners, and one of them specifically said, like, our target audience or market is X, which is wealthy because it's a boutique fitness studio. And I thought, and then I said, so I thought it first, then I said, are there no wealthy Black people in your area? Is that what we're saying? And so I wonder, was that just not a space for Black people to exist at all? Like, that wasn't, they weren't actually catering to that.
It didn't feel like it, no. The space definitely felt catered to more so the LGBT community more than anything. So not even like white, Black, people of color. It just felt more geared to LGBT community and not necessarily too race specific. But of course, within those spaces, you don't see many Black faces to begin with anyway.
So then what did you do? Because you continued to teach, like you did your trainings and you continued to teach. What did the next phase of your teaching look like? Where did you go to teach if you weren't teaching in studio?
I was renting out a yoga space. So there was this yoga studio space. I can't think of the name of it right now, but they had hourly rates. They would give you packages. If you wanted to buy 10 classes, you get if you wanted to buy 10 hours of space, you get 20% off the total price. So I was renting out that space pretty regularly to hold classes and different workshops and that's pretty much how I was teaching like the first few years. And then of course, having friends and making community through Instagram. Like that's how I found my yoga community. Since I wasn't in a studio regularly, I found it through Instagram. So being around different yoga teachers from different cities and stuff, like traveling with them and seeing them do workshops and retreats and stuff like that, they'd be like, Dara, you're teaching this meditation today. And I was like, oh, but I wasn't ready to. But just having those friends that give you those like gentle nudges to be like, you're certified to teach, you're going to teach, this is what you're going to do because we're in this space. So yes, I'm going to give you the nudge.
Well, I love that. It's also, I mean, as yoga teachers, we are independent, oftentimes independent contractors. And I think people get a little bit confused about the difference between an independent contractor and an employee at a yoga studio. And it sounds like you were ushered into entrepreneurship or this idea of like, I am an independent contractor and I have to make moves for myself, which is renting out this space, promoting it, because a lot goes into that. That's not just I'm renting out a space, because you have to feel it.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. And that's the beauty of Instagram for me. Like I built the following authentically by just sharing my practice. Instagram was like my video journal, video photography journal for my yoga practice. And people flocked to it. And I remember people asking me to teach before I was even certified to teach. And I'm like, y'all are not getting me to mess you up when I'm not certified to teach. So once I finally got the certification, I was like, all right, y'all asked for it, come get it. Like, this is the first class, so we're doing classes these 3 weekends. This is the workshop that I'm putting together. So promo all the time through Instagram to kind of get the bodies in the space.
Mm-hmm. I love that. There are also some things that you've done within the Instagram community or people that you have met through Instagram that caters towards Black people. And I want to say you've participated in the Moving Art Experience.
Wow.
Yeah, will you tell us a little bit about that?
So Moving Art was put together, it was combining body movement and art. So yogis would get body painted and then we would share our practice with the community or whoever showed up for these shows. And it has been an amazing experience. This would have been the 5th year, I think we would have done it. And I've been a part of it since the very first one. And it doesn't get old. It doesn't get tiring. It's just so much fun because I think what it does is it allows people to see yoga in a different way and to see in another way for people in the community, especially Black people, to just see more Black people doing something that they might not necessarily be doing, right? Because Black people is not many Black people are going to be like, I'm curious about yoga. Let me go to this yoga studio down the street. Like that's not their first instinct. Mm-hmm. So to see yoga presented in the way that Moving Art presented it was such an interesting way to introduce people to the practice.
Absolutely. I definitely have seen, I've never got to experience a show in person, and I follow many of the people who participate in it. And it's a display. It's interesting because it is a display of the pure athleticism that Black people tend to have in a yogic setting, because it's so beautiful and extreme. And I appreciate it because, one, because of the art form, and two, because oftentimes we only see thin white women doing these advanced postures or white men doing these advanced postures. And Moving Art is one of the communities who has highlighted the ability of Black people to be just as talented or just as skilled as some of the advanced white yogis that we see all over the place.
Absolutely. And I love that it's not just Black women that you see in these spaces. Like you see Black men in Moving Art as well. So it's an eye opener for men as well, because, you know, Moving Art makes for a great date night. Like that is such a good date idea. And then it's like, you get your girl who's like interested in yoga, and then she can be like, look, they doing yoga, them men doing yoga too, you can do it too. So it's such a great experience to see both men and women do this practice. And then even sometimes where we just have like these little jam sessions where we're doing like acro yoga as a part of it, you see another layer of what yoga is. So it's so many layers to moving art, and what you get out of that experience as a whole, that's just so beautiful to be a part of.
Yeah, you absolutely said a word in terms of getting to see Black men practicing yoga and also being flexible or being able to do some of these advanced postures, because again, like we don't get to see that very often. And so I think that is beautiful to see on display for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah, so I think what I'm interested in knowing is you ended up doing I think you're addicted to teacher training, but I'm not going to say that like as a like definitive, but you were just in a training this summer, yes?
I was.
And you also had a bit of a leadership role. You had a leadership role in that. And I'm interested to hear of your perspective when you heard of the BLM Rocket Yoga teacher training. Knowing that you have had these other trainings, what moved you to get involved with that?
Um, I might have to co-sign the fact that I may be addicted to teacher trainings. Because I always feel like I'm forever a student. Like I feel like I have so much more to learn. I always have so much more to learn. And I also have to get out of my own way that I can share what I already know and still learn in the process. Like I don't have to accumulate X amount of knowledge before I can share. But when I first saw the BLM training, I was like, oh, this is cool. I was like, I don't know what Rocket Yoga is. I've never done it. But I was like, let's find out what it's about. And I wasn't expecting what it was. It was very intense, and it's such a disciplined practice. I'm so used to vinyasa and it being so very like flowy and light. And yes, like your alignment isn't always the greatest when you're in vinyasa or whatever.
Can you say that again?
Your alignment isn't always the greatest in vinyasa. You heard it from me. If somebody wants to attack you, tell them you heard Dara say it. But Rocket Yoga is super disciplined, and it forces you to level up in a way that I've never experienced before in a practice, and it's very intense as well. Like it'll get your heart pumping. It'll make you sweat. It's very, very awesome. And it's funny how I fell into a leadership role. I wasn't expecting to fall into that role of leadership amongst the training. It's funny, when it first started, Brandon put out something. He was like, if you want to be a mentor for your region, fill out this survey or send this email, whatever. And I was like, nope, not doing it. I'm just here for the training, get my work done. I'm still working. Like I've been working through this whole pandemic situation. So I was like, nope, I'm working. I'm just doing the training for myself. Like this is all that I'm doing. I'm showing up for me, being selfish. And I saw my poor regional mentor like trying to answer as many questions as she could and respond to everybody. So it just naturally came to me to just be like, hey, this is where you could find this. Hey, did you check the manual? Hey, it's on page 5 of the manual. Like, so it happened naturally, and I was really trying to shy away from it. And our mentor Angeline was like, she messaged me privately and was like, hey, would you mind helping me out a little bit? Because I don't know what happened to the rest of our mentors, but I see you offering a helping hand. Can you help a little more? Mm-hmm. So I was like, sure. And what it really showed for me was a reminder of like, you don't have to know everything to teach or to be in a leadership role or to feel like you can be at the next level. You can teach and be the mentor and be in a leadership role while you're still learning yourself. And I feel like as a teacher, you should always be a student. Always. Like it never ends, because there's always more. There's always another layer. There's always another aspect that you can pick up and learn from. So the BLM training really kind of lit that fire under me and was like, sis, you keep getting pushed into these leadership roles for a reason. Like, you're gonna keep fighting it, but but they're gonna keep showing up. So that was a nice reminder to just be like, allow yourself to step into this role in this position, and trust yourself and trust the power and stand in it. Like, I
How
think
long have you been practicing?
7 years.
Okay, this is very different, right? Like, this is what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna pause you right there, mid thought. This is what happens because the industry is so whitewashed, right? It is so whitewashed that in leadership, we often only see white people.
Mhm.
And in order for us to, or token Black people, and in order for us to shift that, there has to be this opportunity given or provided for Black people to be elevated, right? We have to have that opportunity. We can have the leadership skill set all day long, but like if the opportunity does not exist, then it's kind of like you can go try to create it yourself and get your own clout. But we know that the industry has been whitewashed for so long. So in terms of credibility, it's like there's got to be an opportunity. And I will tell you this, ma'am, I absolutely sought you out and was like, they're about to be a mentor for this good old August training as well, ma'am.
But I was so happy that I was grateful that you saw that and wanted me to be a part of the August training. And I jumped all over the option. I was like, of course, sure, why not? Like, I don't mind. And again, it was just further confirmation of, I feel like when you get into those leadership roles as a mentor and just like hire a little bit the next level above student, it's a refresher for you as a teacher. Like, talking about sequencing and what comes before what, and like open before close, open before neutral. Like, it refreshes everything that you already know. And that was such a great reminder to me, July and August, like, girl, you know a lot. And you just kind of sitting on this stuff that you know. So like, how can you take what you know, still continue to learn, and just present at a different level as opposed to just teaching yoga classes? Like, what's next?
Yeah, I love that so much. I literally was speaking to one of my mentees this week about that right there. When I lead yoga teacher trainings, I am learning. I am learning from the experiences, from the shares, from the bodies that are in front of me. All bodies are not the same. So I'm like, okay, your knee doesn't track with your second toe on purpose. Like, that's structural. That is not a functional variation. Let's not give you the same cue that I would give someone else who has, a functional variation. And I think it's that, like you said, knowing that you can do both. You can lead and learn in the same space. And that also puts you in a position for people to trust you and lean into. Because sometimes what I experience in white leadership within the yoga industry is that I have arrived, or I'm evolved to a certain place, and you are beneath me. And that doesn't feel good. It's like, wait a minute, like, you just cussed somebody out last week, like, or whatever the case is, like,
Right.
And so I think that having that realness of like being in the learning process with your students and knowing more than them to, yes, do know more and be in a place of learning, that creates a sense of trust for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think too, with us as Black yoga teachers, because the playing field in leadership is so lopsided and lacking, we kind of place it on ourselves to be serial like teacher trainers, or like to take all these trainings and to spend all this money to constantly learn, because we feel like we have to be 500 hours or 1,100 hours certified before we can lead workshops or do CET trainings or to just be in these leadership and mentor roles. It's like we feel like we have to learn twice as much before we can just do the bare minimum of what some white yoga teachers are doing. Like, because just and it's just because of that stigma that comes with just being a Black yoga teacher. Like, people just assume or feel like we don't know as much, or we aren't as well versed in knowledge in the practice, and that's not the case.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I shifted my perspective on the July and August training to really, and even beyond that, in the Rocket Yoga system, to provide mentorship for people who are ready and are like, I have the desire to lead workshops. I have the desire to lead CETs. I have the desire to lead teacher trainings. As I'm working my way right on out of teaching yoga, I'm like, let me share with you all that I know so that you can take this information and rock it. Because at this point, because of what's happening in the world, you do not have to have a 500-hour cert to go lead a workshop.
Right.
You can put a workshop together on foundational postures and lead it next week, and people will come because people are interested in yoga at this time. And specifically, our people need the yoga. They need the access to the yoga and the understanding, the foundational piece of it, versus this glossing over that tends to happen, I think, particularly in vinyasa classes, because we get to missing the alignment and the foundation. And I think, if we want to keep people generally safe and we want them to come back to this practice, then we have to meet them where they're at physically, for sure.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with you. And it's funny, it's something that you mentioned during the August training, I believe it was. It's like the sequencing and anatomy of all 200 trainings. Because I remember you said like your sequencing and anatomy and your 200 hours was kind of trash, and you felt like you had to just focus on that for 4 to 5 years before you really felt like you had it together. Mm-hmm. And the same thing with me, like sequencing and anatomy is, it's okay. But it's like the sequencing, I was taught to teach lotus flow. Like that was the sequencing that I was taught to teach. Mm-hmm. So to teach outside of that, it's like I have to reteach myself and learn other ways of sequencing and anatomy, because so it's like studios are teaching you how to teach either one, how they want you to teach so that you can then be a teacher at their space, or your sequencing and anatomy is like a day. You get 1 day of sequencing and 1 day of anatomy, and then that's it. But the body is amazing, and it's so intricate, and the slightest thing could really mess somebody up. And we definitely need to be more cognizant and more aware of how the body moves, and teaching it the right way and using the proper language to teach.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think it is that we're at the beginning of a shift, especially because we have so many teacher trainings going on right now, that it took the 50 million teacher trainings to be happening at the same time for people to look at the teacher training and say, this is not enough. I don't know enough. Like, this is not, although I guarantee you that those teacher trainings have been the same for years, right? That content has been the same, and people are just now being picky, or even just like really paying attention to like, this is not enough information for me to go out in the world and actually teach what you just shared with me in teacher training. I think the dangerous part about teacher training as a whole in yoga is that it can be heavily focused on the spiritual practice and spiritual understanding and growth of and learning of who you are, but it doesn't actually teach you how to teach someone.
Mm-hmm. No,
like, this is a teacher training though.
Right. Absolutely. No, I feel that. I feel that so much because I feel like I got so much spiritual meat and potatoes, but then like teaching, it was just like y'all gave me the sequence and that's it. Like that's what we doing. I know I gotta like cue it and figure it out. Okay, gotcha.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, with that, I am going to open up the floor for questions. So if any of our friends have questions, you can type your questions into the chat and we will answer those questions for you. I also, while they are putting their questions in the chat, Dara, do you have anything that's coming up, anything that you want to share, or where can we find you? Like, where can we stay connected to you?
Sure. Best place to stay connected to me is through Instagram. That's where I'm most active. Pint Size Nurse is my Instagram handle. Uh, I am putting together a beginner's workshop that I will be hosting virtually, most likely next month. I wanted to do it last month, but work has been very crazy right now. So just trying to find the right time to do it. But I'm definitely, because I feel like my practice has gone back to base and back to being simplified and everything, I wanted to do like a nice little intro to yoga basics class. And just to get people comfortable with taking a class outside of a beginner's class, or, you know, or feel comfortable taking a beginner's class with anybody. And breaking down the layers of what yoga is, like understanding there's more than one style of yoga. There's 8 limbs of yoga. Like yoga isn't just fancy stretching, you know? So that is something that I'll be putting together and hosting next month at some point. I haven't figured out a date, but that is where I'm at.
I love that. And I love that you acknowledge that like your full-time job is nursing and there's this love or passion that you have with yoga, and you do find ways to share your passion, whether it is through moving art experience, workshops, different things like that. And I'm just excited to just keep poking at you to see what else you want to be involved in and where else do you want to take your teaching, because I do believe uh, one of the reasons why I was originally drawn to you is uh, through Instagram, yes, seeing your personal practice, but also watching how you engage with people online has been so amazing. Just whether it's encouragement or whether it is like directness, it's very refreshing. It's like you're a real human being and you're sharing from a place that's very real and authentic. And in social media, we don't always get that. So I know that I've been appreciative of the way that you show up in that space for sure.
Yeah, it's very easy to take the pictures and make the pretty post and quote Rumi and quote this person, you know, and leave it at that, and like it really have no substance to it. And I've always wanted to just be authentically myself when sharing and posting on social media, because like you said, it's hard to really get that genuine connection with people. So I always try to just be as honest and genuine as possible when I'm interacting with people. And also like drawing the line, like, hey, you can be a little friendly, but don't get out of pocket. Because I'm gonna check you too if you talking crazy. Or I'll just block you. But there is that layer of just like, this is who I am and I don't have it all figured out. You might think that I do, but I don't. And this is just me.
Yeah, I love that. Well, it doesn't look like anyone has any questions for us. I just want to say thank you so much for choosing to be a part of this experience. And as I'm saying that, we do have a question by the lovely Kinga, who was also one of our guest teachers. And it is, what is your advice for Black yogis just getting started to connect with the Black yoga community online? How'd you get your start, Dara?
Um, I got my start by just sharing my practice. and just being honest about it and showing up as myself. Like I didn't try to be a teacher of or emulate a different teacher that I saw. I think for us as Black people in the Black community, we need people who are genuine. We need people who are authentic. We need people who are real and honest with us. So don't fluff it. You don't have to sugarcoat it or make it something that it's not. When it comes to yoga, let people know like this is a practice that is absolutely beautiful and it will help you on multiple levels, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. And as Black people, we hold so much shit. Like we're holding trauma from our parents, we're holding trauma from what we're seeing on TV and social media. And yoga is such a great outlet to help us work through and move through what it is that we're feeling. Because sometimes we can't always articulate it. We may not always have people that we can talk to about it. So I think just sharing what yoga has done for you and sharing how it's helped you evolve, I think that's a great doorway to let Black people know, like, hey, this is a practice just for us. Just because you might not see it all the time, like understand it will help you just as much as it's helping skinny white Becky over there do her little back bends. Like, you know, I really think that's just how you connect with us. Like I said, Black people, we want the truth. We want honesty. We want authenticity.
I love that. I also think that with that advice, you also create the opportunity for us to go back in time to what Instagram yoga community used to be like. We used to be able to just share our practice and just share like what's coming up. And now it's a little different. It's a show and it's like, it's a lot of things. So I love the advice to get back to that authentic place. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ilulu, she says, how do you balance the self-practice healing with holding space to teach / share with others? In the past, when I've tried to share, I find myself burning out. How do you balance that?
So being mindful of what it is you want to share and what it is that you're teaching, right? Because if you're teaching just like a regular Saturday morning 11 o'clock class, like you don't need to go into like a super deep story of something that happened during the week that like really stressed you out and burnt you out. Because for your hour class, they might not need that much depth. But if you're teaching like a workshop or like something, I've taught a workshop dealing with self-doubt. That's probably not the name of the workshop because I did like 2 years ago, but like a self-doubt workshop, getting over self-doubt. That required me to share a bit more of personal experiences that I go through. And of course, just making sure that one, you're grounding before you teach these classes and workshops and afterwards too. I've learned the hard way that not being hydrated, not eating, things as simple as that, like you don't really take into consideration when you're putting together a class or a workshop. Like you really need to ground yourself with food and water and hydration outside of just like the practice itself. So grounding in those areas and in those ways are super helpful to help you sustain your energy and balance it all out. And then of course, like your personal practice, after you teach a workshop, come home and do some meditation, do some restorative yoga, do some yin, things like that will help balance it out. Or even just coming home to shut your phone off and disconnect from everybody. Like those are little things. And of course, the more you do it, the more you realize what it is that you need personally to recharge afterwards.
Yes, it's a whole energy exchange to teach like that. And also it's so important to set the boundaries and give yourself what you need for sure. But if you don't sit down somewhere, you won't know what you need.
That is true. That is true.
All right. I think that we'll end with that. Thank you so much for choosing to be a part of this experience and sharing your story. It's so important and necessary to get to hear from people like yourself. There is no other Dara, just one, just you. And I'm so grateful that you chose to be a part of this. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you. Thank you for having
Yeah.
me.
And thank everyone else who chose to be here and be a part of this experience. We have 2 more weekends of this. Please do share with your friends and let everyone know. We are recording to share later, and it's awesome to have questions in the chat and whatnot at the end. So let your people know what's up. Cool. Well, with that, peace and blessings. You all have a great rest of your Sunday. Namaste.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. I love it. Thank you, Dara.